And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight I am joined by my guest, Joe. Joe is from the 222 Paranormal Podcast. You want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself before we dive into it?
Yeah. First off, thanks for letting me on the show. This is great. I know we met before and we had a good conversation, but to actually do a show with you, this is awesome. I'm really proud to be on the show. But yeah, my name is Joe Shortridge. I'm the co-host of the 222 Paranormal Podcast. I do it with my sister, Jen. And we've been on the air for 9 years now. We've done over 400 and some episodes. And we get the honor of traveling around the country doing conventions and also traveling around the country doing ghost hunts and finding interesting places to go with relation to the paranormal and all kinds of other strange things.
Mm-hmm. I know we'll touch base on it here in a second, but I feel like there's always a reason why people start a podcast, especially in this sort of realm. Like there's always something to put you in that. So is that something you'd want to talk about, of how you guys started the show, of like what influenced you to do it? So
I was always into listening to podcasts. At work, I work in a factory and you get a lot of time to listen to different shows. So I was listening to a bunch of different shows. And one of my favorite ones was Mysterious Universe. It's still one of my favorite shows. And back, years ago, I had a situation with my best friend, Jackie, that propelled me into trying to learn about the ghosty side of it and the afterlife side. I was always into UFOs and stuff like that, but I was never into really ghost hunting and stuff like, on that side of it, learning about the afterlife and stuff. And my sister was ghost hunting with the crew from Ghost Adventures at the Ohio State Reformatory. It was one of those things where you pay to hunt with them.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that and she loved it. It was amazing, she said. And she said Zach scared the crap out of her because he was provoking a lot and getting extremely loud. And she came back and she's like, you like podcast and, you had the thing with Jackie. Why don't we start up our own podcast? And I'm like, all right. So I did some research, got the equipment, and that was 9 years ago now. But I had a thing with my best friend, Jackie. We were really like psychic friends. I almost say like soulmates, but not lover type stuff, but best friends. And I actually had a shared death experience with her, and it made me want to pursue, what happens when we die, ghosts, stuff like that, because after it happened with her, I had tons of communication with her through music. She used to love REO Speedwagon, and she used to play this song and just drive me insane. Well, now it's still driving me insane because I'll walk into places thinking about her and the song will come on. Or I had a good example. I was at work and I'm writing a book about shared death experiences and mainly about her and mine, and I was at work one day and I'm like, should I go home and work on the show or should I work on the book? And just as I said that or thought that in my mind, about 5 machines down from mine, I hear one of the guys' radios play REO Speedwagon, that song. You heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend. And I'm like, all right, I'm going home and work on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Another good example is I was doing a float session. I do float sessions, which is sensory deprivation tanks.
Yeah.
And what that is the one I get into looks like a big egg. and it has about a foot of water in it, and it's salt water and so thick with salt water that you actually float. No, the water is the same temperature as your body. There's no light at all, and it's completely dead silent. So it's so relaxing. It's like sleeping for a week in an hour. And you have different experiences in there also. A lot of people will experience dreams while they're awake. They'll see colors, stuff like that. But I was doing the float session, and I came out of it, and I had a message on my phone, and my sister said, come over to JoJo's, which is a local bar / pizza place here. So I go over there. And one of our friends, God love her, she's a sweet girl, but she likes to tell the same stories over and over and over. And I thought in my mind, I'm like, I'm sick and tired of the same old stories. Just as I thought that, the jukebox pops on, the REO Speedwagon song. So if you're tired of the same old story, I'm like, okay, Jackie, I'm leaving. Jeez, But, communication like that through dreams, phone calls from the dead. I've had a couple calls where my phone rang. I looked down and it was her cell phone calling me, and she's been away for years. I've had, I wouldn't say there's two types of dreams that you have when you see someone that passed. It's either them trying to tell you something or just normal stuff. And a lot of our dreams are just normal stuff. And she's in them. But so anyways, short story long, that's what got me into the paranormal, which got us into doing the podcast.
So there's always something, I feel like, that always influences someone to go down this route.
Yeah. It's amazing because, as you know, doing the show, you have to learn something different every week, basically.
Yep. I
am constantly, which I love to learn. I constantly have to learn something. So I always say, I don't know everything, but I know enough to get by. You know so many little things. And every time you go down and look at one thing, you're always going down these rabbit holes, looking at tons of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know later on, we're going to talk about the mounds. And that's one of the things is, the correlation between the mounds and hauntings and stuff. But, we talk about ghosts a lot on the show because that's the main thing. But we also cover, Bigfoot and alien stuff. And we interview people and also do where we just talk. It's like a hybrid show.
Mm-hmm. So you were one of I think you were actually the first time I ever publicly talked about whatever I experienced.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we talked at that Para Unity event. I literally just started this show like maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior, and that was the first time I was actually out talking about the show, try to get the word out for it. And then I sat down and talked to you about the thing that I experienced on the road just a couple miles from here. Yeah. And I never spoke to anyone publicly about it. Like people around here knew, like my friends, my family. I've talked to it happened years ago, but like you were the first time I'd ever actually publicly spoke about it. So.
Oh, well, you think about it too. Is that's one thing that when we do these conventions, me and my sister have done close to over probably 100 conventions now because we were doing conventions every single weekend for a while. And when you're on the road like that, I mean, I usually am either on the road with our show or with the band, and it gets to the point where you're like, what city are we in? And we got that way after a while, but we cut back a lot. But at these conventions, it's awesome because it's a place that people can go and talk to like-minded people about their stuff, because so many people come up to us at our booth and say, I've never told anybody this, and we're like, well, why did you come up to us and talk to us about that? And it's usually, well, I feel more comfortable here, stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it's more accepted because other people in the area have had similar experiences, or it's more common for them to talk about it because they don't feel so taboo. Because if you're just in a random spot talking to people you don't know, it's like, how are they going to react? But if you talk to people in this sort of paranormal aspect, they're not going to look at you and think that you're crazy, because look around you. We've all had some sort of
we're
weird
all crazy.
Yeah. You got to fit in with a group of crazies at this point. So
we were at a convention in Pittsburgh. It was the MUFON UFO convention. And the convention hall that it was in was huge, and it has these huge windows. So where we were sitting, where our table was, you could see out these big windows. And there was a guy that came up to us. And when we do conventions, we take our equipment with us. We interview people at the conventions. That's one of the things that we do. So we had all the microphones set up. And this guy comes up. He's like, "Are those on?" We're like, "No, not right now. But, if you want to sit down." No. He's like, "I don't want you to record me." I'm like, "Okay." And he's at a UFO convention, and he's all fidgety and all that. And we set it up where we had their local news crew coming in for the morning show, good time feel stuff where they go in places and interview people. And I see the news people walking up, and he didn't see him. They're walking up to our table with their camera and everything. He turns around, sees them, and literally ran out of the building, down the escalator, down, and we could see him outside the convention center running down the sidewalks away from the building. It's like, dude, you're at a convention, you're here to talk about aliens and stuff,
Right.
But who knows? He was just afraid to be on camera or something, and literally ran out of the building.
I actually had heard something similar to that before from someone else that, I don't remember if it was on my show. I might have just heard it on something, but some guy come up to them and he'd freaked out because of something that they talked about. And then he'd reckoned, like, they had something up there, whatever. There was something that they drew or he'd seen or the guy had talked about, and it freaked him out so bad that he ran out of the building and just kept running. He didn't want to even be in there anymore because of something that was going on freaked him out so bad.
Yeah.
So
we were at a Bigfoot convention down in Ohio, and this guy come up to me, and he was talking to me for a little bit about his experiences, and he was talking about this UFO that he saw, and he described it and everything. And some other guy comes up while we're talking, just out of the blue, and sees that, our stickers, and it says Toledo, Ohio on them. He's like, "Oh, you guys are from Toledo?" And we're like, yeah. So we opened the circle up, basically. We, everybody kind of moved back, so we're all in one big circle now. And this guy starts talking about his UFO experience, and it was the exact same thing the guy was telling me about his. It was like the same night and everything. And I'm like, "Come on, you guys know each other, don't you?" And they're like, "No, we don't know each other." It was so interesting to have two people come up and say the same story that apparently didn't even know each other.
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Without derailing the conversation, I actually had spoke at a convention back in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
and I had two supposed psychics come up to me at different times, and both told me something very similar about something that I had spoken about, but I didn't feed into it. I didn't really say a whole lot about it or whatever, and I'm not going to mention about what they talked about, but like, I thought it was strange that two different ones at two different points had come up and told me something very similar.
Huh.
So is there something to it? Probably, but
Yeah.
I just, like I said, I'm not going to dive into any of that, but it's
The
well,
psychic thing is it's kind of, I don't want to say weird, but that to me, it's just strange to me because there are a lot of fakes out there. And, I get probably 2 to 3 people a week saying they want to be on the show. And they're like, "Well, I'm a psychic, and I shouldn't be this way, but my BS meter comes up,
right. Yeah, I get it.
But to have something like that, I had the same thing happen to me at a convention. I had 2 psychics say the same thing, and I'm like, okay, and then I forget her name, but this one was here in Toledo, and she was doing like gallery readings. And that's another thing that when I see psychics and they say, "I do gallery readings," I expect them to come out and say, "I sense someone here had a great grandparent that passed away," something like that. They'll be so general. But this girl, and she's been on a few of the shows, I can't remember her name, but she was saying stuff that to people that, unless it was planted, they would have no idea. Like the people's dogs' names and stuff.
Right.
So, so I can't I get people on the show, and I had one guy that said that he was the light. And, when you pass away and you see the light, he said he was the light. And I'm like, yeah, but 1,000 people are dying right now. Why aren't you helping them,
Yeah.
But my BS meter was full throttle that night. And, I can't really say anything because if that's what he believes, that's what he believes,
I had someone tell me they were God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't interview, but he told me he was God.
But I always say, I'll be damned if when I pass away, I'll turn and look at the light and he'll be standing there.
Right. Well, if you would like to dive into your experiences, we can get rolling with it.
All right. Yeah. So a few things happened to me. Like I say, one of the things is everybody always says that you don't get scared, but I've been to a lot of different locations. I've ghost hunted in old prisons, and the whole gamut.
Yeah.
The prisons, the insane asylums, actual cave down in Illinois. There's a cave down in southern Illinois called Cave in the Rock, Illinois. And if you ever get a chance to go down there, I recommend it. And this cave was a bar at one time. There were pirates on the Ohio River that would live in there, and they would actually kill people in the cave and stuff. And that was interesting. We got some responses out of EVPs and stuff like that in that cave. It's very interesting. But I always tell people I don't get scared. We were in Pennsylvania, and there's a cemetery there called the Black Cross. Now, the Black Cross is back when the railroad was being built. The migrants were working on the railroad, and I believe it was yellow fever came through, and a lot of these immigrants passed away. The Catholic Church wouldn't allow them to be buried in their churchyards. So a farmer gave them a plot of land that they could bury their dead in. And it's not that big, but it used to have a giant black cross, and that's why they call it the Black Cross. And the cross was actually 2 railroad ties put together. Now, if you go there, it's just basically a 5-gallon bucket of cement flipped over, and that's the marker. But there is a historical marker out by the road. We went in this woods, and like I said, it's not that big, but you could sense that the trees were looking at you. You had the most eerie feeling in this. We heard babies crying, which is a common thing in the paranormal.
Yeah.
We had just sounds, stuff like that. But the weirdest thing was there's a tree stump, and it had a red bow on it. And I look at my sister. I'm like, Jen, look at this. I turn and look at it. I turn around, look at her, and I turn back. And I see this apparition of this guy jumping out of the woods at me. And he had the old style flip it hat on. His skin was ash color. He had a red shirt on, and he had gray wool, like woolen pants on. And it was just a split second, but he was jumping out of the woods at me. And my sister said I jumped about 3 foot off the ground. And my adrenaline was pumping that night. I could say that was the only time I've ever really got scared. And we talked about this on a show I did last night where we were talking about attachments. And after this happened, we packed up, went to the restaurant, and I'm at the restaurant, and I feel something on my hand. I look down, there's a tick on my hand. And I'm like, what the hell? So I kill it. And then a few minutes later, there's another one on my other hand. And I'm like, I look at the waiter, I'm like, check, please. We got out of there and got back to the hotel, and I scrubbed, and all that. But we talk about attachments and that you could get attachments, whether they're living things or dying or dead things, So that story went into where we were at the West Virginia Penitentiary, and my sister had an attachment there. She called me one night, a couple weeks later, saying, she just called me and she's like, I'm so pissed. I'm like, why? She's like, I don't know, but I'm pissed. And we ended up going to a convention, and there was a shaman there, and he actually blessed her and got this out of her. So, West Virginia Penitentiary is a very haunted location that we investigated. And it does have the correlation with the mountain across the street, but we've been to so many places and so many haunted locations that was very interesting. One of the other places here in Toledo is one of the most haunted locations we've been to. And it's a house we call the Bone House. Now, the Bone House is, if you look it up online on the maps, it's at 201 Newton Street here in Toledo. And it's just a little house. And this guy bought it to fix up and resell. And he started having things happen in the house. Every time he would pull a board off the wall, bones would fall out. And it turned out that every single floorboard and board on the wall had bones raining out of them. So
That's weird.
he ended up calling Haunted Toledo. Haunted Toledo came in and went to do an investigation. And the first night there, and we weren't there at that time, but the first night that Haunted Toledo did their investigation there, someone was killed out front. Someone was shot out front of the building. Then things would happen in this house. A board was ripped off the wall and thrown across the room in the upstairs. But like I say, every wall had bones behind it. So the coroner came and they took a lot of bones away. And they actually said that they were canine and chicken. And I believe that, but I also saw some pretty big bones there. Now, 24 News came in, so if you ever want to look up on Channel 24, WNWO, the Bone House episode, they were there. This house, it was just the strangest place. There was so much activity in this house. You know the K2 meter, right? It's the device that picks up electromagnetism in the air.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is useless in the house. You could stand on the front porch of this house, and the K2 would just be on. You hold it inside the door, and it would go all the way to red. Now, there's no electricity in this house. There's no running water. But yet that K2 went red and would stay there. It's the strangest thing. We were there one night with Haunted Toledo, and my sister saw an apparition of a girl kneeling down upstairs against the wall. There were drawings on the walls that we couldn't explain. They found letters hidden in the walls. They found women's underwear in the walls. All kinds of strange stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we did some Haunted Toledo is great with history. They looked into this house and they found out that it was a mecca for the neighborhood, that the neighborhood would go there and practice the religion called Santeria, which is a Mexican religion. And they do sacrifice chickens and stuff like that. So I think that with as many years that this happened in this house, that's where all the bones came from. But it's so interesting,
Right.
And the guy that owned it would wake up in the middle of the night, not even get dressed, just get in his car, drive over there and start digging under the house. So right now, if you see the house, the outside looks fine, but the inside is completely gutted all the way down to the dirt in the basement. There's no floorboards. There's rafters that you can stand on, but the house is pretty much gutted now because he would just go there in the middle of the night. It was like it called to him. It was like an obsession for him to go there and dig under the house for some reason.
It's like something was pulling him to it.
Yeah. I was there the one night, and the owner was there. I'm like, come on, man, every board, seriously? He's like, yeah, watch. And he took a hammer and pried a board up, and underneath the board, I should have sent you this photo before, but we pried this board up, and there was a little bone that was carved in like a face into it. And if I didn't see him pull that board up, I would have been like, come on, man, you planted this,
Right. It's almost as if, did he just pick a random board, or is it something? I was going to say, sometimes maybe they have something planted in there that they know the specific board to go to, but.
Yeah, if I would have saw him peel that up, I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of crazy stuff that went on in that house, And then about 2 months ago, my sister did an investigation there. I was at the Spaghetti Warehouse downtown, and she was at the Bone House, which is about a mile away. And we did investigations that night. And she says that she went in there and there was nothing. They didn't get anything, not a K2 hit, not a EVP, nothing. It was all, she says the house feels empty. It's like all the spirits are gone.
Did they remove all the bones, or there's still some in there?
That's what we were thinking. We think that they removed all the bones. We never know for sure, but
Right.
that's what our assumption is.
Yeah, that's the paranormal stuff for me. It's not that it doesn't interest me, but I think it's because it's got more of a creep factor to it. So I don't want to really get into it that much because I don't want to bring something back. I already deal with enough weird stuff as it is. I don't need to bring anything back with me.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people ask me. They're like, well, how do you protect yourself? And you just tell them, I don't really say a prayer per se, but I just tell the spirits, I do not allow you to come home with me. You can't come home in my equipment, even though we've been asking you to touch the equipment all night long. It's basically your intent. If you tell them, do not follow me, do not come home with me, we feel that you have the power over them. And it's worked so far. I've never had anything follow me home.
I know with what we're getting into for this documentary, we're going into some certain areas that are very high potential for paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my buddy that's doing some of the filming for it and editing, he's very superstitious.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to figure out ways to make sure that we say something or whatever, so we're not bringing anything back if that is a possibility, because I don't want to bring anything back, and I sure as hell know that he does not want to.
Yeah. And that's what I say. It's an intent thing. It's just like anything else. It's people say, well, like our dowsing rods and all that. It's all the intent that you put into it. And you do have the power to tell them that they cannot attach to you and stuff. It's all belief thing. If you believe, then it'll happen.
Yeah. I try to go in the areas and I don't do a whole lot of this, but I go in not expecting anything.
Mm-hmm.
That way, if something does happen, I don't want to give false pretenses or go in there and make something manifest because I'm thinking it. I want to see if something happens naturally.
Yeah.
So,
and that's like me too. I whenever I go into a location, they're always like, "Why do you want a tour? You want to know where all the hot spots are?" And I'm like, "No, I don't," because I want to experience it myself. And there may be times when you go into a place and you get nothing, but at least you had that opportunity to get into a old building or something. Because that's one thing I say too is being a ghost hunter. And I'm not really a paranormal investigator. I'm a ghost hunter. Mm-hmm. I pay to play. There's a big difference between a paranormal investigator and a ghost hunter. A paranormal investigator will spend Haunted Toledo and Toledo, Ohio Ghost Hunter Society. They'll spend a month or two researching before they even go to a location. But I don't. I pay to play.
I just go right to it.
Yeah. But there's, I forget where I was going with this, but there's different locations where if you go to them, you really do have to have the intent of, don't follow me, that kind of thing. So I kind of forgot what we were talking about, but
it's all good. No, basically, for anyone listening, if you want to be a paranormal investigator, you want to go to some of these areas, always make sure to try and protect yourself, because I feel like I try and lean more skeptical, but I say that, I think that's just to try and reassure my own self. I'm more of a believer than I am a skeptic these days. Mm-hmm. But I still get weirded out at the fact that if I go somewhere and something happens and I can't explain it, then it's going to creep me out even more. And then I'm like, well, what is it? And then is it following me back? Am I going to be dealing with this? That's why I don't really go anywhere, because I'm an overanalyzer. I overthink things, and then I'm just like, I'm just not even going to mess with it.
I had one night here, and my studio is my house. The studio's in the back of the house, and I have the art gallery and then the rest of the house out there. And I was laying in bed one night, and I got woke up for some reason, and I could see a 7-foot shadow figure leaning over me, and it had its hand on the bed, and it was leaning over, looking at me. And within 2 seconds, it vanished. And just like you would do, I spent the next 3 hours looking at the house going, okay, if a light came through this way or this, trying to analyze what I just saw. And it's I couldn't really figure it out. So was it just in my mind, or was it an actual thing? I'll never know.
Right. Yeah, it's seeing shadows and everything else. Like I have my own kind of ideas of what stuff is, but again, I'm just a guy with a microphone at this point. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So
Yeah. But the more you dig into this stuff, we always say the more we learn, the less we know.
right, then you go in with an idea of what you think you know, and then you find out you don't know anything.
Yeah. And a lot of people, they'll talk to us about being ghost hunters and that, and they'll think that every investigation is like the TV shows. And you know as well as I do that it's not like that.
No.
I know that a lot of the bigger ones and will go into a location and they might spend a week at a location and leave, come back 2 months later, film some more there, for one episode. So they're going to these places multiple times, but they have continuity people that make sure that their hair's the same, the clothing is the same, all that. So it looks like they've been at that location like 2 nights instead of 2 months. So there's a lot of times when you go into an investigative place and you're going to sit there all night long waiting for one knock. And you may get stuff, you may not. But I've been in locations too where the second you get out of your car, you can get activity. So you never know.
Yeah. So I've heard stuff from various people from things that they've experienced, but like other than the few things I've had happen to me, like I used to write it off as it wasn't even paranormal because that's just how I was. But now that I've thought about things that have happened in the past, I'm like, well, was that paranormal?
Yeah.
And I'm very, a couple of years ago, had someone told me that they had this happen to them, this happened to them, and this happened to them. Like, you saw a ghost, you saw a cryptid, you've seen UFOs. I'll be like, oh, you're full of shit because how's one person had all these experiences? But then when you start to talk to more and more people, it's actually kind of common.
Yeah.
So I've changed that stance, and then I've thought about my own stuff. I was like, well, I have seen weird lights out back, and I have had weird stuff happening in the house, and I have seen a friggin' cryptid. So I was like, am I one of the same? I'm a hypocrite now because I've literally said stuff like that doesn't happen, and now I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, well, it's happened to me. So it's like, so I said, I've started as a skeptic, but now I'm like, I'm not really a skeptic anymore.
And we found that a lot of people, okay, let's say someone will have a Bigfoot encounter. Those same people will now start having lights, like orbs. And I'm not talking camera orbs because we know what those are caused by, I'm talking like visible orbs or poltergeist activity.
Right.
Or somebody will see a UFO and they'll start, all of a sudden they'll get a Bigfoot encounter or they'll get that poltergeist activity happen. It kind of all matches. I know that there's so many stories of people seeing blue orbs and then all of a sudden they'll see a Bigfoot.
Yep.
It's almost like the story on Mysterious Universe. One time they were talking about Bigfoot encounter and this lady was driving down the road and all of a sudden this Bigfoot comes running out of the woods, stops in the middle of the road, looks at her like, run, human. And he takes off, keeps going through on the other side of the road. And then a blue orb went past and followed him. So you wonder, are the blue orbs the aliens coming down to pick up their Bigfoots?
I've always wondered, and again, no one really has a definitive answer because anyone that does or says they're an expert, they're not.
Yeah.
But what is the correlation to all of this? Because just use your example, Bigfoot and the orbs.
Yeah.
Why are those connected? Now,
I don't know.
I've interviewed someone who wrote a book. He's wrote several books. This past summer, he wrote a book, and it's about Bigfoot being the forest poltergeist because he said if you have a haunted house and all the activity you have in the woods with Bigfoot, if this happened in your house, you just say your house is haunted with a poltergeist.
Yeah.
But because it happens in the woods, you call it Bigfoot.
Yeah, because when that quote unquote Bigfoot poltergeist happens, you're not actually seeing a Bigfoot. You're seeing this footprints. You're seeing broken, twigs or whatever. You're seeing trees that are pulled out of the ground, flipped upside down and shoved back in the ground. Some people are looking at habitats.
Right.
You know, you see all this stuff, but you don't actually see the Bigfoot itself. And that's why it is sort of like a poltergeist activity.
You hear the noises, you hear the banging of stuff, you see the trace evidence, but you're not actually seeing the Bigfoot. Now, the rare instances when people do see them, that's a little different. But again, all those noises, all those knocks, all that stuff falling over, all those things getting broken. That's if it's in your house is haunted.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It is. I never thought about that till I talked to him. I was like, he's right. I mean,
Yeah, and you got people going out in the woods and making whoops. How do we know those whoops aren't a mating call?
I guess one day they might find out. When I'm going out looking, I'm not going to be doing any whoops. I've already said that. I was like, I'm not banging on trees. I'm not going to go out there and yell and whoop and do all that stuff. Like, this is my thing. If these things are out there, they're going to know that I'm not them.
Yeah, and they're going to know you're there a lot sooner than you're going to know they're there.
Exactly. So me going out there and acting like an idiot is not going to draw them closer. They're going to look at me and they're going to be like, this is an idiot, and they're going to leave. But if you go out there and you're not showing the intent of what you're doing, you're just out there, they might come up closer just because they're curious of what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of more people seeing Bigfoot when they're not looking for them than when they are.
Yep. I've heard that too, and I believe it, because the most plausible experiences that I'd come across are the people that weren't looking for things and have these experiences. The ones that go out and claim that they went out and they found Bigfoot here and they did this and they go out in the woods all the time. They're coming up with new evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you finding it all, but everyone else that goes out there never has an experience, but there's one person that's constantly having experiences? I was like, that seems a little sketchy to me.
Yeah. There's a girl on my Facebook page that's constantly posting pictures. And, you know, like I said, if she believes it, she believes it. But every single one of her pictures is so blurry that you can't even see. And, you know, she says, look, those are eyes right there. And this is the big one and stuff. I'm like,
red circles.
If you saw a Bigfoot every day, every single time you went out and you saw that Bigfoot, you would be on every news channel in the world. You know, I mean, come on.
I wonder if, and this isn't a dig at anyone that does this, but like, are they seeing the things that we're seeing, or is it, do they actually see something in their mind that they're seeing something that we're not capable of seeing?
Yeah.
Because that's what someone argued with me that there was something in that photo. I was like, I don't see something. They're like, well, you're just not open-minded enough to see it. I was like, I literally see blur with a red circle. Like, I don't see what you're showing me. But they swore there was something in those photos.
Extreme pareidolia, where they see it all the time because they're fixated on it.
They want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I want to see it too, but not to the extreme that I'm going to say everything in these circled photos is a Bigfoot or whatever it is that they wanted. I still look at it from a realistic perspective. Like, if it's a blurry freaking photo, it's a blurry freaking photo. I'm not going to say it's a Bigfoot because I can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that to someone, they get offended if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then there's certain groups out here, like, not to go off on a tangent, but now I'm riled up.
No.
There's certain groups out here that if you say something to someone, if they post a picture and you question them, you're automatically getting attacked by every single person in there because you're a non-believer and you're just a troll. And I was like, it's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Like,
I get that a lot because I actually teach a class on orbs and why you get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, with your cell phones, and I explain to people that, you know, you got to look at your cell phone. The camera is right next to the flash. The lens is the size of a ballpoint pen. So when you take a picture and you get a white orb, that's dust in front of the lens, you know? And there's other people that have shown me pictures, and it's like a line, a white line on their photo. And they're calling them plasma beams now. And I'm like, no, because how digital cameras work is called rolling shutter. And as you take a picture, the line of pixels, depending on the darkness, depends on how many lines of pixels are open at one time. and it's a rolling shutter. It rolls from either top down or bottom up. And let's say you take a picture and there's a piece of dust, and I'm talking, you got to remember, like I said, the lens on that camera is almost the size of a ballpoint pen. So the distance between the top of the lens and the bottom lens is nothing. And if you have a piece of dust or that going through there, and as the shutter is working as a rolling shutter, it's going to pick up that dust all the way down, which is going to make a line, which looks like a plasma beam, they say. And I get that all the time where people will send me a photo and I'll explain to them, this is this, or this is lens flare, you know. But I mean, there are pictures that I can't explain. But if I tell them, oh, this is lens flare because you can see this bright light in the corner here, and you can see that they're the different color of lenses because there's blue and green lenses and stuff. And then they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about because that's my grandmother or something, you know?
Right.
It's like, but it's all subjective. And like I said, I have actually seen, I was at the Collingwood Arts Center here in Toledo, 3 a.m, sitting in the main auditorium watching blue and red lights float across the stage. You know, that's not cameras, that's visible orbs. You know, so I mean, there are real things called orbs, but it's just, you have to understand how things work. You have to understand how your equipment works.
So the other night, I don't know if I've even mentioned this on an episode yet, but I got super excited because out back, I saw 2 green orbs moving around the fence line. Yeah. And I got my phone out because at this point, I remember when I've seen stuff before, I've not thought about grabbing my phone. Well, at this point, I had my phone, so I started recording. I yelled for my wife to come look, and she's like, I'm pretty sure that's the neighbor's dog. I'm like, shit, she's right. The neighbor had put like green lights on their collar.
Oh.
So they were moving up and down the yard next door along the fence, but I just seen movement of green light because it's really dark out there. Like there's no lighting. So I just seen these lights moving. And I was like, that's not the first time we've seen like orange orbs floating and stuff like up in the sky. Like it wasn't obviously an animal because they're up above our barns and stuff. But like, this was the first time I'd seen something on ground level, and I was getting ready to go get my boots and run out there to see what this was. But then she said they're dogs, and I was watching how they were moving. I was like, yeah, they're dogs. But I'd never seen it before. So at first I just got super excited thinking, I was like, I'm finally getting some stuff filmed out here.
Yeah. But, all this time I've been trying and finally I got it. But, but it's that the 10% of stuff that we can't debunk that really keeps us going.
I've tried to say this too for like doing what we're doing, like this documentary. We've interviewed people. We're going to some of these locations, but like, I don't want to go in there with the idea that we're going to catch something, because that is a very snowball's chance in hell of happening. But I also don't want to go out there and be disappointed. And here's this documentary where we got nothing but us walking in the woods, but that's pretty much 99% of the time what happens in these things.
Yeah.
So kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah. It's the expectation. People want that expectation. What's going to happen? You know,
right.
What's going to happen around that corner?
Well, and as you mentioned, like these paranormal shows, they've set it up to where it's expected for something to happen because these TV shows are for entertainment purposes. So the most minute little thing happens and it's blown out of proportion on TV because you got to make it entertaining for the audience.
Exactly.
And I'm not about that. So if I hear a tree snap, I'm not going to freak out. I'm like, oh, there's a tree snap. I'm going to be like, huh, you hear that? And that's about the extent of my excitement I'm going to be.
Like, okay, let's investigate that, but let's make sure that it's not just a squirrel or something.
Right. I'm not going to instantly go to Bigfoot or paranormal. It's just there was a noise.
Yeah.
But all these shows instantly go to what they're out there looking for. So,
and like you said, it's entertaining. And I know probably 80% of the people that are on these shows, and even they'll tell you, and you know from going to the conventions too, you talk to them.
Yeah.
They'll tell you it's entertainment. We have to keep something for next week, every episode.
Yep. I guess if when my documentary comes out, if it's the only time I've ever done a documentary, then I was like, at least I'm honest.
Yeah.
Never do another one. But we're doing it DIY, so
you may not get something, but you're at least covering history and you're also covering legends and stuff.
Right. So we're just out there to talk to the people that have had these sightings and these experiences, and we're trying to put like the locations out there and do our own little investigations. And if we actually catch something, that'd be awesome. But we're just mainly just doing it to be like, hey, this stuff is happening around here.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of like me with the mound stuff.
Right.
I've been so interested in that. And I've been doing a lot of history with it. And one of the places I go to all the time is Newark, Ohio. And that's by Columbus. It's just east of Columbus. And Newark used to be a mecca. Like the mound, the whole city were mounds, whether they're effigy mounds or if they were what we call road mounds, where they're mounds, but they're just like go this way type mounds, you know, so people can know where to go for the other aspects of the mounds. There's two big mounds there right now. The Great Circle Mound, and that one there is a 1,200 foot round mound. Okay, the walls of it are only like 14 feet, but it's a giant circle, and in the center of it is the Eagle Mound because it's in the shape of a bird. And sometimes I think it's not really a bird. I think it's more where people would lay down, you know, or something. But who knows? But that was interesting because they found a lot of stuff at that mound, a lot of Indian stuff. And a lot of the stuff they pulled out of there is in a museum in Coshocton, Ohio. And there was a guy in 1888 called David Wyrick. He was one of the amateur archaeologists of the area. He was a surveyor, so he did amateur archaeology. And the one day he was digging around the mounds and he found something. And he calls it the Keystone. Okay. Now I have it here, but this is obviously a replica. The real one's in Coshocton, Ohio, and these are called the Newark Holy Stones. Okay, so what this is it's a shape of a keystone, and there's writing on it. So he was like, "Oh, there's Native American writing all over this rock, basically."
Yeah.
So he knew stuff was around there, and he took this down to Cincinnati, and one of the guys that he took it to said, "No, that's Hebrew writing on this rock that he found in Ohio." So he knew something was there. Now, there was another mound called the Great Stone Mound, and they went and they took 10,000 cartloads of stone away out of this mound to build the reservoir that's there at the lake, and then they put Route 70 right where the mound was. But before they built that, they took all the stones away, and there was a clay basin, which is very odd for a mound. So David Wyrick got a bunch of people together, and they started digging into this clay. They ended up finding a giant coffin. Okay, and inside the coffin was a giant skeleton. And when we say giants, you know, I talk a lot about the giants. We're talking 8 to 10 feet tall. We're not talking 30 foot tall.
Right.
Or not like you see on Facebook where there's a skull that's 30 feet wide. You know, no. Giants back then were around 8 feet tall on average. But they were giants because they're bigger. Now, this giant that he found, they took and opened up the casket, and the bones turned to dust as he touched them. So it was there a long time. Okay. There's two stories. There's one that he found a little casket on top of the skeleton. And other ones say it was underneath the skeleton. I don't know. It was either or. He picked this up. It was a rock little casket, and there was something in it. He rattled. So he broke it open. And what he found inside was what they call the Decalogue stone. Now, this is a stone that is probably 4.5 inches tall by about 2 inches wide and about 1.5 inches thick. There's a carving on it, and the carving is a person, and above it, it says Moshe, which is Moses. And just like the keystone, all over this stone, there's Hebrew writing. And what it ended up being is the 10 Commandments, all in old style block Hebrew. So people are like, wait a minute. They're finding stones, one made out of black alabaster or something, in Newark, Ohio, in giant skeleton mounds. And I'm like, yeah. But the thing is, that's where we go with the mounds. Is we don't know who built them. They think that it was the Adinas that would build them, or the Mississippian people, they call them. They're not sure who actually built these mounds. And I feel that the giants built the mounds, and then the Native Americans came in and used them, because if you talk to any Native Americans, they always say, no, the mounds were here before our ancestors. Okay, so finding something with Hebrew writing on it in Ohio kind of really made people think. Now, there was another stone that they found in Back Creek, Tennessee. And this stone had writing on it. And it's a real small stone. It's only like 3 inches long. They took that, put it in a museum. It sat in a museum for years. And one day someone came in the museum and said, why is that upside down? And they're like, what do you mean? They say, that's upside down. That's Hebrew writing. It says with him on it. So I think that it's my belief that either the Hittites or the lost tribe of the Israelites came over and settled in the Ohio Valley area, because in Ohio alone, there were over 10,000 mounds at one time. And pretty much all of them are gone by now. You got Miamisburg, stuff like that. But a lot of the mounds are gone now. And a lot of the mounds, they find giant skeletons in them when they excavate them. And I think that the giants were actually either the Hittites or the lost tribe of the Israelites, who came over here thousands of years ago. So a lot of people say, no, it was a Hopewell culture and that. No, it was a lot of the Native Americans said that those mounds were there before they got to the land. They just used them as burial mounds with, their settlements. So I love looking into mound stuff. A lot of correlation between the mounds and hauntings. Like you've got West Virginia Penitentiary has a mound right across the street from it. That's very haunted. Downtown Toledo had 2 mounds, and the locations of those, the buildings that are there now, are very haunted. So it's real interesting. But going back to Newark, Ohio, you have the Great Circle Mound, which is the 1,200-foot mound. But you also have a thing called the Octagon Mound. This is an octagon that covers about 50 acres. And what's interesting about this is it's set up in an octagon shape for the 18-year moon or lunar cycles. So every 18 years, there's a lunar cycle where the moon will rise at one of those points or set at one of those points. So it's almost like they had to take, and every 18 years they put a spot. This is where we put it, But the interesting thing about the Octagon Mound is, if you were to go over to Egypt and take the Great Pyramid, pick it up and go to set it down in Newark, Ohio, in the Octagon Mound, each one of those points on the pyramid lines up perfectly with one of those points in that mound. It's the same size. And we found that a lot of people thought that the pyramid only had 4 points in it, but the Great Pyramid in Giza actually has 6 points. If you look straight down, you'll actually see that the walls of it actually tilt in a little bit. So there's actually 6 lines on it, which would match up with the Octagon Mound. Also, the Octagon Mound, the entrance to it, to true north, is the same exact angle as the Great Pyramid from the bottom to the top, the angle. It's the same angle. So I think that there's a correlation between the people that built the pyramids and a lot of the mound builders here in the United States.
This wouldn't be Tinfoil Tales here without a little conspiracy, but
bring it on.
Do you think that there's a reason they're hiding the giants? Because the stories are the Smithsonian or whoever gets these things, and that they claim the giants aren't real. There was never any big skeletons, and
and
what's the point of all that?
A lot of stories of the Smithsonian coming in and taking them.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to be friends with a girl that lives in Aruba that talks about the giants a lot. She even says that her grandma was a giant. And in Aruba, they don't hide it. So they're on display. And they do have the giant skeletons. But the thing is, I think that they don't show them here in the United States because in academia, if you go against what the standards are, you're called like a shyster or,
almost like a heretic.
Yeah. And it's just like David Wyrick. They really went down on him because they called him an amateur archaeologist because he wasn't a professional. He didn't do it like they did, and it's like that. If you don't go with the mainstream, you are out of your mind or whatever. And I think that's why they do it here in the United States, why the Smithsonian came in and took most of them. Instead of just saying, yeah, there were big people here. There's still big people here. We just call them wrestlers or basketball players.
Right. That's where I was getting at is like, we still have people that are considered tall or quote unquote giant for the, like,
we're not talking 25-foot tall people,
right.
We're talking 8 foot, 9 foot people. But there were some, they have found skeletons. Good examples here in Toledo. About 4 miles from my house here is the Toledo Yacht Club, which is very haunted. Next to the Toledo Yacht Club is the Coast Guard station. In the 1800s, in between that location, when they were actually building the Toledo Yacht Club, they actually found skeletons down there by the river that were giants. They found 8 of them. Now, these had the double rows of teeth. Okay, so the skulls, and they said that the skulls were so big you could put the jawbone over a normal person's head. And they had double rows of teeth. Now, the ones that they found down in Maumee, Ohio, which is probably 10 miles down the river, had 6 fingers and 6 toes. Now, people think, well, wait a minute, oh my God, double rows of teeth and 6 fingers, 6 toes? People are born like that now. It's just not as common.
Yeah. It's a birth defect is what they call it today.
Yeah, exactly. And if someone was born with 6 fingers at birth, sometimes they just cut them off. I know it sounds gross, but they do. And the double rows of teeth, I forget the exact term for it. It's a huge word, but it's a common thing. I mean, I shouldn't say common. It's a thing that happens. People are born with double rows of teeth. Have you ever seen a X-ray of a baby's skull?
They're very, very creepy looking.
Yeah.
So the giant, like the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave or whatever it's called out west.
Mm-hmm.
Same descriptions. They were red-haired, 2 rows of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes on each hand and foot. Like, I know there's some people and some listeners and other podcasters, they all want to go back to the biblical aspect of this, and they claim all the giants were actually Nephilim. But also in the giant, you had the David and Goliath story. There's a bunch of other giants in that, but they were all supposedly from the fallen angels breeding with humans, and then you had your race of giants. But then the story goes that most of them, or supposedly all of them at one point, were wiped out from the Great Flood. But then why are there still more evidence of them, or supposed evidence of them, afterwards? So apparently they weren't all wiped out.
Yeah. When they say the world disappeared or the whole world flooded, are we talking their world? Back then, the writings were different.
It was very centralized to their locations.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't, their whole world was there. Like, it wasn't the whole planet.
Yeah. Every religion has their flood story myth.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all different, but yet they're all the same.
My scientific brain would say that a lot of the flood stories may have been because of what happened 10,000 years ago. They claim we just came out of an ice age. So if that's the truth, then obviously I could see waters rising because of things thawing out, but it wouldn't be that dramatic. You wouldn't think it'd be so instantaneous. So something had to have happened to influence the story that's literally been passed around like on different religions, different continents, even. Like there's been stories of floods all around the planet.
Yeah. I think, and what is his name? I forget his name. Man, my brain's mush tonight. But he talks about the flood was actually caused by a meteor hitting the ice sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence that shows that something like that happened, because you have, when you look at a small river, all the ripples at the bottom of it,
right.
You can actually find those different places in the United States that are 3 miles wide and stuff. There's waterfalls that are undercut. And the only way that can happen is if it's a sudden onset of a ton of water
mm-hmm.
that erodes it that fast where it undercuts. There's so much evidence that there was a catastrophic flood, but yet every religion talks about it. And I'm wondering if let's say there was a meteor hit the ice sheet and there was a giant melting in the floods. How do we know that they didn't see that and say, well, God created that and then wrote about it?
Yeah.
Because if you believe in a God of some sort and you see something like that, you're going to say, well, God did that. And that's what they write down. And that's why every religion has that story.
Yeah. That's kind of where I've always thought like something had to have happened, because again, even with local legends and like even with Native American stuff, like any aspect of things that you get these stories from, I say, is because they've actually seen it. Something influenced these stories. Like they didn't just make stuff up.
Yeah.
So something had to give them an influence to write about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like something happened. I don't know what caused it, but it could have been something hitting the ice and mass flood. Now, I'm not one that is against the Bible or anything, but like I don't necessarily believe that Noah built an ark and put 2 of every species.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's impossible.
Yeah.
Like I know they say, well, God help, but like think about all the insects that we have. Think about all the different animals that we have. Like it just doesn't seem at all plausible.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying that isn't true. I'm not saying he didn't build something and brought 2 of what he could get on there.
Yeah.
But 2 of everything, I mean, they don't know of everything at that point.
Exactly.
So,
maybe it was just 2 of everything he had in his area or something, you
right.
know? And the Noah myth goes right back with the flood stories. Every flood story has a person that is told that there's going to be a catastrophic something happening, so they have to build a ship or a boat or an ark or something, and gather up their family or all these animals and get on there. The flood happens, and they're the survivors, and they repopulate the earth. That's how every story goes, and it's every religion has that, and it's basically the same story.
I feel like a lot of the stories, though, from all religions all tie back into the same principles for the most part of all religion stories.
Yeah.
Which makes you go back to believe like they all have, like, I could be 100% wrong, but I believe like the Muslim God, the Jewish God, and the Christian God is actually still the same God.
It is. Yeah, that's how I feel.
They just don't see it in the sense of how they go about, like, the Jewish culture does not believe in Christ, which is why you have the Old Testament. And then the people that believe in Jesus have the New Testament to go along with the Old Testament. Without going completely biblical on it, but I feel like the God of the Muslims or whatever, I don't know, is it Allah? I think is what it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I still feel like to me, it sounds like the same God. It's just a different interpretation of things.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. They interpret it different, and within their writings and over thousands of years, it basically morphs into this different styles of religion.
Mm-hmm. But again, everything from that, asked for that versions of their gods all stemmed in that same centralized location around Egypt.
Yeah.
But you also had all of Asia. You had the Native American people that were here over in America. You had the people in South America. They didn't have the same beliefs in that. They had believed in gods, but it wasn't that type of a god. Like some of them believed in the sun gods. Like that's what the ancient Egyptians believed in. There's all different variations of different gods that they all worshipped. But I feel like most centralized religion when it comes to like what we have for modernized, at least in America, like Christianity, it all stemmed over in the Middle East.
It did.
Which, why there? I don't know.
I don't know.
But like it's just weird how things played out, and here we are, a couple thousand years later, and we're discussing it.
Yeah, isn't it like the Temple Mount? Wasn't that 3 different religions that have spent time there? I think it's Catholicism, Judaism, and something else. I want to say is all. That's why that Temple Mount. They say that the next time it is destroyed is when Jesus is coming back and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. I do know that, again, putting on that conspiracy hat, I think a lot of the stuff in the Middle East falls, at least I'd have to talk to my friend Brad about it, but he is very big into ley lines and the 33rd parallel. A lot of the weird stuff that goes on in the world happens to fall on that. And he claims that, which I could look it up, but I think like that whole area is somewhere within the 33rd parallel. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that stuff. That's one thing I don't look into yet.
Yeah, I have an episode about it, and there's a lot of interesting things that happen along that. Like historical events happened, like JFK's assassination was on 33rd parallel, like all sorts of weird things that go on. Like if you just keep following it around the world, like there's a lot of big cities that fall into that area. There's a lot of big events that fall in there. I think the I was about to call it Mount Sinai. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but like that in the Middle East, it falls over in there too. Like a lot of just weird locations and fall within that line.
Yeah. You know, when you think about too, is like here in Toledo, there's a road called Tremainsville. My sister lives off of it, and there's a lot of haunted type stuff that happened there. We call it 5 points, and it kind of ramps up and goes back, you know. But what this path was from Tecumseh, Michigan, down to here in Toledo, and then down to downtown where the mounds were. There was like a path, okay. And there's paths all over, like the Anthony Wayne Trail, which they say Anthony Wayne used that trail to do for the wars and stuff. But you think about it this way. How these trails and roads all became, at first you had animals that followed the path. And I think it was because they followed magnetics, sort of like birds do. And, you know, they follow a path, they're migration paths. Mm-hmm. So they wear the ground because they're walking on that same path all the time. And then the humans come along and they follow those paths too. And then later in years, the horse and buggies follow the same path, and then cars do. So I think that it all goes back to the reason why these trails and that seem to be always the same. And they say they follow ley lines or magnetic lines. I think it's because the animals started doing it and they use them. And then the humans it's just like when we're up snowmobiling and all of a sudden you're in a snowmobile path and a deer's running in front of you. Well, they're using that because it's easier than running through the woods. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how these ley lines and, you know, paths that like the 36 or the is 33
33rd.
Yeah. All these certain things are on that because I think that's where the trail started. So they started building more stuff on them. I don't know. That's just my thought.
I think a lot of it is something to do with like the actual magnetic fields of the earth. And again, that's how birds migrate. Yeah. And again, that's how animals probably sense that. And again, you're going to follow your food sources. So if we're hunter-gatherer people, we're going to be out there following the food. So again, I believe that. Like, I think that something draws, they follow the trail of what they need, and it just so happens to be in that. That's why there's a lot of stuff that goes along that. Yeah. So, because there's also
it's sort of like
there's other ones too.
Full moon thing. There's more motorcycle accidents on a full moon because there's more people out riding because it's brighter out. You know,
they claim on full moons, hospitals always have more people that show up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is all just BS, but like, and then you hear there's more arrests on nights of full moons because people are doing dumb things on full moons. It's like, is it because of the full moon? Or is it just because, like what you said, it's brighter out, so more people are out doing stuff because of that? Is it? It's not because the moon makes them do it. It's just gives them more opportunity to go out and be an idiot.
That's what I'm thinking.
But I guess maybe people go out and think they're werewolves. I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, is there anything else you would like to discuss? We've been talking for a little over an hour.
Yeah. Not that I can think of. I mean, you know as well as I do that once we start talking, we just keep going down these rabbit holes. So we'd be here for 4 hours if we did.
Yeah. I definitely enjoy talking, but would you like to let everyone know where they can find your podcast out and any events that you're going to be at here soon?
Yeah. Like I said, we're the 222 Paranormal Podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast from, we're on all the outlets. We're going to be at some live locations. We really, like I said, we cut back. We're going to be at the Ohio State Reformatory in May for Parapsychon. You have to look that up. I think it's the first week of May, but I'm not positive. I have to look on my calendar. We're going to be there. We're going to be in the Festival of Oddities up in Michigan. But there's a lot of locations that we're going to be at that we are just going to visit. I know in Alton, Illinois is the how does that? Oh man, my mind is mush tonight. But the American something Paranormal Convention in Alton, Illinois, and I'm going to go there because right next to there is the mounds. There's huge mounds there. That's yeah, my mind just went blank. But anyhow, check out our website. We're going to be all bunch of different locations. Our website is 222paranormal.com. I've updated it to have the locations we're going to be at. So we're going to be at different conventions all over the country this year.
And I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes for anyone listening.
Yeah. I'm sitting there trying to think of where we're going to be, and my mind just went to mush. But it's late night. I've been up since 5 a.m. So
I feel that. So about 10 after 5 is when I got up. So, well, Joe, it's been a pleasure talking to you. If you'd like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And just remember, truth comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price?
I heard a story late last night about something lurking along the wood line. Huge footprints, strange lights in the sky. They claim it's nothing, but I know they lie. It's easier to laugh in my face, but something about this makes me say, what if it's real? What if they knew? What if the answers are coming from you? Spinning stories, wasting my time, hearing voices, is it all in their minds? They can call me crazy, but I just want some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil Tales, pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They see a dog man walking, or maybe a mothman flies above the buried giants, hidden beneath the lies. They say it's just stories, it's all make-believe. Fairy tales for the things we can't perceive. They want to keep us blinded, they want to break our will. But I'm not buying it, I'm not swallowing another pill. Force-fed poison, the lies we're made to believe. What if the truth could set us free? Alien signals traveling through time, secret space programs erasing their minds. They call them crazy, but I just need some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? demons, ghosts, the Nephilim too. What if it's me? Or what if it's real? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil Tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. It's all in our heads, it's all in our minds. These voices can't be silenced, the truth must rise. Tinfoil Tales, it's pulling me through. What if it's real? What if it's true?